Hello and welcome to another episode of the My DW podcast. I'm Rob Hansford, and joining us today is someone who is very well known to the DW community, having won the race for the last couple of years, Anoushka Freeman. Hi Anoushka, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Flattered to be invited on the podcast and really looking forward to talking about canoeing for the next half hour or so.
Yeah, well, I mean, we will come on to shortly. We will come on to your exploits, having won it for the last couple of years. But first of all, we'll kind of go back to the very beginning of obviously your DW adventure. I mean, how did you first come about the race?
So I first heard about the race when I was 11. My older sister, who I idolized at the time, was taking part in it with her new husband. I got forced to go to bed after having wanted to track it all night long. And when I turned 16, my school were offering it as kind of an adventure rather than a race, and excitedly signed up, thinking it would get me to be as cool as my older sister if I could get through that. I turned up to the kind of first training session. There was about 40 young paddlers or aspirant paddlers. Effectively, there's 20 seats in 10 school boats. And there's a bit of a survival of the fittest thing going on. So effectively, you keep turning up until eventually people drop out. And we got to a situation where there were 20 paddlers who actually wanted to do this. And then we've actually signed a piece of paper that said, like, I'm doing this and the commitment is here. And then that began a couple of months of training, often at Pusey Wharf or Bedwin. And then eventually did DW as a junior in 2016. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, but the most kind of amazing adventure. I know, sadly, lots of the paddlers from school find it to be sort of one and done, but I decided that I really wanted to kind of carry on with canoeing. Found the kind of nearest canoe club, which was Devizes at the time, who welcomed me with open arms, especially the amazing Trev Hunter, and sort of started training there a bit. And then went a whole journey with canoeing, kind of aside from DW, got into a bit of marathon racing, a bit of sprint racing, and eventually came back quite a few years later to have a go at the senior doubles.
What was it like that first time you got in a boat, obviously with Marlborough College? I mean, yeah, what was it like that first experience? Was it daunting for you with thinking about what was the challenge was ahead becoming a reality?
I think there might be an element of naivety in those first few days where it's like it's still sort of autumn rather than the deepest, darkest winter. And it meant that I got away from having to do bull sports, which I was very much not good at. So I was excited to be out in a boat, sort of messing around on water, and sort of immediately really enjoyed it, and found I was at peace on the water and really enjoyed kind of my time out there.
Your first DW as a junior, do you want to talk us through how that race went for you?
Yeah, of course. So didn't sort of know that much about what we were signing up for. Got to school the morning of the race, and I remember the teacher saying, like, this is the hardest thing that you'll ever do, but if you don't finish, you'll hang your head in shame, and you'll be very, very sad after you've got home and had a nice warm bath. And there were definitely really hard times, but I think an overwhelming sense of like amazing support from our own support crew, but also from all the other amazing parents out there, especially like the stages race is particularly lovely because there is such a family feel, because there are so many young people. I remember day one was flying, loads of fun. Day two, I probably overcooked day one, not so fun. And some lovely mum who I didn't know came at me with an entire lemon drizzle cake. And I think I ate the whole thing. And from there on, day two was epic. So I was basically fueled by lemon drizzle for half the day, and then sort of got my mojo back by day three. And then unfortunately, my race was cancelled at Teddington that year due to Storm Katie, which maybe in hindsight was a blessing. It's perhaps fueled a fire within that I needed to come back and get to those Westminster steps one day. So although it was kind of gutting at the time, I think maybe it did sort of make me want to come back and have another go.
How did you find it having to get up each day? Because obviously that's one of the nuances, isn't it, with the stages races? It's 30 odd miles every day. How did you find that at the time?
Definitely, in some ways, I think that element is harder than the straight through race. The straight through race, you get on with it. You probably go to some darker places, but when you're done, you're done. The stages race, you've got to keep getting up. You're not always having a warm shower. Sometimes you're camping, and camping's pretty tough. But a really amazing experience. Like all the school crews kind of really bonded. And so a lot of fun as well, and really felt like an adventure for us.
Did you like the camping side of it?
I have camped once since DW, I think, and that might be testament to my desire for camping. But it was a really cool thing to have done.
Yeah, and then obviously you moved on from junior, and then you went into the senior doubles. How long was it between your last juniors and obviously first senior race?
I did junior in 2016. It wasn't until 2023 that I came back. I did some sort of much shorter racing in the interim and also moved around. I was at Devizes, came back to London for my gap year, was at Richmond, then went to university, went to Leamington Spa, and then came back to Richmond. And it was at that point I started to kind of see DW around again and think maybe I want to have another go at this. And in 2023, I was training for the K1, and with 48 hours notice, we found out that the K1 wouldn't be able to go ahead because of the conditions. And I remember texting a friend, Sam, who was also meant to be doing the K1. He was in the middle of watching Lord of the Rings and couldn't be interrupted until Lord of the Rings had finished, but sort of begged him to get to and it was his birthday as well, begged him to get to the canoe club at the end of Lord of the Rings and let's get in a boat and give it a go. And that was 48 hours before DW. We went for a 4K paddle, decided it would be sort of good enough. Spent probably 6 hours tinkering with the boat, found out that the rudder wires were really frayed at the 11th hour, so re-threaded the whole thing with a few stops to get food because we have this quite long race quite soon, and then basically went to Devizes and got on with it. So it's pretty amazing.
That's quite the way to embark on your maiden adventure at the straight through.
It was, and I think that you can overthink the race so much, and obviously I have in subsequent years, but actually there is almost a beauty in the fact that you can also get on and do it, and don't get me wrong, we had the most amazing support crew and so much experience behind us, and so we were able to kind of scramble around the canoe club and find things like lights that people had tested very well. But yeah, you don't need to be on like a 10-year plan to DW. You can do DW from a relatively quick turnaround.
48 hours is a pretty quick turnaround.
Quick turnaround. I remember Tom Sharp telling me at the time, like, remember DW is a multi-year game. And obviously him and Keith have started the kind of record campaign in 2018 and ultimately weren't able to get that until 2023 because of a number of different factors. And it definitely is a multi-year game. And I would say to anyone who hasn't necessarily managed first time, keep at it because it will come, but also give it a go and be bold and ready to have a go.
Yeah. So, I mean, that first year then, so you got 48 hours notice, just literally, what was it, a single paddle, a training paddle before going down to Devizes?
I think we did two. One was 4K and one was 2K or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously you've been training for K1, so, you had the stamina about you and everything else, but little time in the boat as a K2. How did that race go? Obviously, some respects people would say you must have been underprepared, but I mean, as I say, yeah, how did that plan out for you?
I think one of the best decisions we made, and all credit to Sam for this, is we took a really stable boat. And so the kind of run of the boat was never a concern. We were rock solid in that boat. And I'd always recommend paddle a boat that you're really comfortable in. It's a really long way and you want to be comfortable. And you're way better off taking a slightly bigger boat and kind of being comfortable in that boat. So yeah, we had a nice big boat. We had no time pressure at all. Very much just wanted to get from A to B, set a very conservative schedule, had the most amazing support crew and kind of really good atmosphere along the way. And I think we were both just really excited to be there more than anything. We started probably in kind of the thick of the DW masses. There was about 5 boats around us, which in subsequent years was quite different for me. So I think we even had a V-wash for a bit on the pound, which was amazing, something I never would have thought would happen. So it was nice. We had a good day out and sort of yo-yoed around with a few different boats. Yeah.
And how did that night section sort of come into play for the first time? Because obviously that's really when you start to get sort of cook and bolters, that's when it really starts to sort of kick in, doesn't it? In terms of fatigue and the mental side of your brain telling you should be stopping now, but you trying to force yourself, no, I need to keep going.
I've always quite liked the night. I feel like I get into a mindset where I look forward to watching the sunset and then I sort of count the hours until the sunrise and I gets me through. And I know that I did, even at that time, know the course pretty well, in that I've sort of lived on the Thames for a long time and done paddles of some definition around there. So I've always broken the course up into quite a few different sections. So get me to kind of Waterside D, so get me to Newbury. Then I'll do Waterside B, so I'll get to Aldermaston, then sort of do Thameside 1 and get to Reading. And always kind of just chunking it up into just get to that next milestone, and then eventually get to Windsor. And our kind of bread and butter paddle down is Windsor to Richmond. So now I just need to get to Richmond, and then when you get there, the rest takes care of itself.
So is that how you do it? Is it, because I mean, some people will do it by like when their next support stop is going to be, in terms of when they're next going to see someone. But is that how you do it, like in terms of by sort of races, essentially?
Yeah, there's definitely a lift in seeing people, and if I've got some sort of need, I'm looking forward to seeing them for a new potato or sorting my camelback out or whatever it is. But in terms of like the way that I mentally break it down, I break it down into sort of bigger chunks that I have paddled in sections. And I always really like doing Waterside D. I know not everyone does. But for me, it gives me that confidence. Like, I feel ruined after, but after D, you're like, okay, well, I can do that again in 2 weeks. And when I get there, I can do a bit more. And when I do a bit more, I can do a bit more than that. So I've always really liked doing Waterside D.
I mean, what was your time for that first year then?
I think we did about 1840. I think we were about within 10 minutes of our schedule, which is pretty insane considering how little prep we had and how unknown it all was. All credits to Lizzie Broughton, who I think pretty much put the schedule together while I was sleeping the night before. But there was fairies working in the background. But yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, a pair of you, obviously, if you and Sam only 48 hours and not really knowing you're going to race each other, to then go and do a sub 20-hour time regardless, that is no small feat in its own right, is it? Especially for your first attempt at the race.
We were very lucky with a lot of flow that year. But I do remember also thinking, just get to Reading and then just sit on the Thames, and the Thames will bring you home. And I had that again in 2024. 2025 was quite a different experience. Get to Reading and pull quite hard until you get home.
Yeah, we will move on then. So obviously to your first winning year, so 2024. Obviously, you and Tom, how did that partnership with Tom come about? Obviously, you're part of your canoe club at Richmond, but yeah, how did that sort of come about, the pairing?
So we did one of the 10 at 10 series at Elmbridge Canoe Club. I think it must have been like a year and a half before. I was looking for a Div 1 K1, Div 1 paddler. Tom needed a Div 3, couldn't paddle with a Div 2 because he was too good. So kind of went along to that. We had a good enough start and basically sat in the V-wash the whole time and were virtually incapable of doing anything else, but had like the most amazing cruise speed and realized that we paddled quite nicely together. And then sort of Tom went off and did DW with Keith. I ended up doing DW with Sam as a happy surprise. And we were at the kind of post DW party at Richmond Canoe Club. And I sort of said to Tom, you've won the K1 now, you've won the K2 and you've got the record. You should probably have a go at the mixed. And that was kind of the start of like me slowly plugging away over winter. Eventually Tom said, like, should we go for a Hampton Court paddle, which is his like bread and butter DW training. Generally only does it if it's flowing really fast and really dark. Make it as hard as it can be. So went out for a Hampton Court paddle, like went quite well, and thought, we'll give this a go. For me, I really wanted to have a go at the record. Lizzie and Keith are absolutely formidable paddlers. They were not blessed with good conditions on the day they did their record. So sort of thought maybe with some good conditions, there'd be a chance that we could have a go at that. So yeah, there began our training.
So how did you go about, we'll move into training a little bit later in a bit more detail, but how far out from the race was sort of your training? When did you start?
So I think we committed in sort of end of December, and I went skiing shortly after that and tried desperately not to break a bone. Came back in January and sort of hit the ground running from there. And in terms of like what our training looked like, we trained a lot. I will talk about my DW this year and also in other years in terms of a training comparison. The last 2 years, I aimed for sort of at least 100K a week on the water from January, and then did 2 runs a week. If I wasn't injured, I did some spinning when I was injured, some swimming, and then some gym as well. So we did do a lot of training. For me, I prefer to look at like a weekly volume than looking at doing one huge paddle. I think you can go and do 100K on Sunday and prove that you're good at doing 100K, but you might not paddle for 2 weeks because you'll be exhausted. So I think it's much better to sort of plug away at lots of average size paddles and let them add up over the week. We obviously did do like some long paddles, lots of like 3-hour paddles, but we didn't do anything outrageously big, just lots of general volume.
That year, obviously 24 was, you just mentioned earlier, it was a pretty fast year, wasn't it?
It was absolutely amazing and like such a privilege to be on the water. I remember we got to Reading and like the first K we did on the Thames was like a 3:30, and Tom just said, enjoy this because it's a total privilege. And it really was. And we were having the best time. And we were really lucky. We felt so confident in the boat that we weren't really concerned about kind of the river, and we could just have a lot of fun. So it was really incredible.
And how did it sort of feel, sort of taking your sort of first victory? And it wasn't just sort of, some people say, look at it and go, well, obviously I know you said aiming for the mixed victory, but it was that, the overall victory as well. Like you kind of smashed it out of the park, really, didn't you?
I think it was really nice for me in that it wasn't what I expected. We didn't set off last. Or certainly I didn't. Tom always has a bit more confidence than me, but didn't expect to be winning that race. And we weren't winning that race until about halfway through. And we weren't really concerned by the others. We were paddling our own race and we were having a good time and we were on schedule. And it wasn't until about halfway that Lizzie said to us, you're in the lead now. And then every time we heard from them, it was like, you're in the lead by a bit more. And we weren't really having to work any harder, but we were just sticking to our schedule. And I think the others maybe falling off their schedule, I'm not sure. But that was a nicer way to win than the year just gone.
Yeah, I mean, talk us through. So a lot of our listeners and obviously a lot of the guests we've had on this podcast have been sort of at the sort of stage where they're doing it to either finish or to get a decent time. And it's primarily focused around themselves. Obviously, the way sort of you and Tom ended up coming into it, halfway through the race, as you say, like you take the lead and you can't really think about just yourself anymore. It's about what the others are doing. How does that sort of run through in terms of your mindset? Because obviously that would be very different to sort of the vast majority of DW paddlers who are doing it for the challenge, whereas obviously you're doing it for the race. So yeah, talk us through a little bit about how that kind of works with your mindset.
There's definitely a race on, but I think whether you're in a race or not, you have to be paddling your own race, and you have to be staying calm and staying true to your schedule and your capabilities from the get-go. Tom always said, like, we will take splits, but splits are just information. They don't change how we kind of tackle this race. And you can't do a massive burn up a quarter of the way in because you want to catch someone. You will pay for it later. So we designed a schedule that was ambitious for sure. But we weren't going off schedule because other people were ahead or behind their own schedule. We kind of stuck to what we wanted to do insofar as we could. And I think that whatever level you're at, that's really important.
I mean, we'll go into 25 now. Last year, I was another victory, but that was, you said, like very different circumstances, wasn't it? It wasn't just the flow was low on the Thames in comparison to 24, but also there's headwind pretty much the whole way as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there were kind of two things that made 2025 ultimately the hardest one. And I think in part, the conditions were really tough. There wasn't very much flow. There was outrageous headwind, but also the competition. And I say we don't adjust our schedule, and we didn't. We were pretty much exactly on schedule until we fell behind around Windsor, I think. But you hear that information and you find more in you to stay on schedule and to stay chasing. And so it was an incredibly hard race, and like hats off to Joe and Brindy and all the other kind of fast boats. It was incredible.
Yeah, because I think, when you guys sort of all reached Teddington, I think it was three boats in the space, like separated by no more than about 6 or 7 minutes or something like that. I mean, how does that go through? Because obviously it's the final push on the tideway. I mean, do you just still try and stick to your plan, or is it that at that point do you start to think of like, we need to try and just empty the tank down the last 18 odd miles to make it really sort of work? Well, yeah. How was that last tideway stretch?
By the time you've reached the tideway, schedule is out the window. You've made the tide, which is obviously the most important thing in the whole race. Goal number one, always get to the finish. And to get to the finish, you need to get to the tideway. And so you're just hanging on in there. And I think, it doesn't really matter what race you're in, you're just hanging on in there. And we were definitely trying hard. And when we got to Teddington, different people were saying different things, but the kind of end result was there's probably about a minute in it and we don't know which way it swings. So you've got to give it your all. And I was paddling along as hard as I could. And there were people around us who were stopped. So I'm thinking, well, we're doing a bit better than them, but it didn't feel incredibly powerful or dynamic or anything like that. And sort of in my mind thinking like perhaps the win is slipping away, but I'm giving it everything I've got and more, and we'll see what happens. So it wasn't until we were walking up the steps that we found out that we had one. So there was so much noise and my head and eyes were so cooked. I was trying to hear like, have we won or not? And it was so tricky to kind of work it out.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I was stood at the top of the steps when you guys came out. I saw Tom looking up. I was like, "Have we done it? Have we done it?" And then I just saw his face when sort of the realization set in. What was it like for you once you suddenly realised that it was the victory was yours?
There's a hilarious photo of Tom celebrating on the steps, and I'm like rubbing my eye, which I couldn't see out of, and trying to sort of sort myself out. So I think it probably hadn't sunk in for a while for me. But it was obviously really special and a privilege to win a second time in such tough competition. It definitely makes the win feel even more special.
How do you motivate yourself to sort of go at it sort of year after year? Because obviously, you did 24, back 25, back-to-back wins. How do you sort of like you motivate yourself, through those years to keep coming at it?
So I think even going back from junior, 2016, got cancelled at Teddington, sort of fueled a fire within my belly that I will have a go at this race once more. 2023, did it with Sam, had so much fun. Like having a low pressure race as the first one was amazing. So I thought I'm definitely going to come back at this and see if I can better that time. And the opportunity with Tom presented itself, so sort of jumped at that. But then ultimately, again, Tom and I didn't get to Westminster that first time because it was cut short at Teddington. And so again, I think that fueled the fire in the belly that I was going to have another go. And we basically said to each other, I think it was a week later, it was my birthday, we went for a paddle and we're like, I guess we're doing it again next year. So we had like an amazing lead up into it as well, in that we had another year of training and whatever. My boyfriend in that time asked me, will you do DW with me one day? And I said, I will, after I've had one more go with Tom. And he said, what if you guys, for whatever reason, the record doesn't happen? And I said, I won't keep chasing a record forever. It's completely condition dependent. And I sort of can't keep chasing that forever. So really pleased to kind of have had 2 goes with Tom, but also excited to be moving on to a more relaxed one this year.
Well, I was going to ask actually, plans for future DWs. Are you coming back again in 26?
So I'm back again this year with my boyfriend, which is very exciting. He asked me, coming on to over a year now, when I was still having one more go with Tom. I think the first year the first 2 years he watched it with Sam and then with Tom, it probably looked quite easy almost. We were having a lot of fun. We were smiling the whole way. We were joking around. I thought I'll have a go at that. I think last year probably looked a lot harder, but we were locked in by then. So there was no going back. So he started paddling in July from an incredible running background. So he's very, very fit. And been really enjoyable to kind of be able to actually spend time together on the water, not have my weekends dominated by canoeing with Tom, which was a lot of fun, but maybe less fun for Rob, who was at home making the roast dinner.
Yeah, so does that change sort of the boat that you're paddling then?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said before, I'm a massive fan of take a big boat that you're comfortable in, and you'll have a much better day out. So we are paddling the same Mirage that Sam and I paddled, which has kindly been loaned to us by Boris and Vanessa. So this will be its 3rd time going to Westminster, hopefully.
Does that feel a little bit odd from your perspective, where obviously you've been paddling, obviously you have the fastest boats, you and Tom, when you're racing, you can't get any sort of, tippier from a stability perspective, also faster from, obviously reduced drag on the water. Does it feel a bit sort of unusual when you kind of have to reacclimatize to a different boat that is more stable and therefore a bit more draggy through the water?
Generally, I'm not too fussy with a boat. A boat's a boat on the water. I notice it on the portages. It is a lot heavier. And I'm in the front and there's no handles. And I think my forearms will suffer. But on the water, I'm sort of generally, as long as I'm comfortable, I don't really mind what I'm paddling. And it's got a good seat, which is the most important thing.
If you're training for the Through Dark Devizes to Westminster International Canoe Race or any long-distance paddling event, you need to have your nutrition strategy prepared.
Precision Fuel and Hydration provide education and products for events like the DW, and my go-to are their PF30, PF30 caffeine and PF90 gels. They taste clean and simple, they're easy to take on the move, and the amount of carb in each is on the front of the packet, so you can keep track of how much you're taking on. The PF90 even has a resealable top, which makes it perfect for long paddles. Their electrolyte tablet comes in different strengths, and for me, there isn't a better option out there for staying hydrated during a DW. Check out the link in our show notes to read Precision's guide on how to fuel and hydrate for the DW. And if you have any questions about your strategy, then you can also book in for a free video call with their team and talk it through with an actual human.
Moving on to sort of, training in a bit more detail. Obviously, you've gone through sort of like how you break up in terms of you do it across the mileage, across the week. How do you sort of go about your nutrition through your sort of training period for the race?
So I've explored with different things over the years. The sort of key player has generally been boiled potatoes with a lot of salt, which I think is most people's DW sort of recipe. We've made them and kept them in a flask, and they've been slightly warm overnight, which has been really nice. Had a few different things, like I like jam sandwiches with some salty butter on white bread, because I think it's got less fibre in it, supposedly. Some flapjacks. I've had yogurt, like those sucky patches, maybe 2 of them throughout the race, and sort of lots of variety, but potatoes have been the main one.
And do you sort of use gels at all? Or do you tend to stay clear of like gels and sort of the, electrolyte drinks and things like that?
I'll definitely have a drink. I've used the High Five ones and the Precision Hydration ones. I think they're all sort of the same stuff. So find something that you like the taste of and you're happy with. I dilute them more than they say. I think when you're going to be out there for, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 hours, it is not the same as what it says on the packet for a 2-hour marathon runner or whatever it is. So I do put a bit less in there, but I'll have those going throughout the night. In previous years, I've chosen 2 different flavors so that you can kind of mix it up. It does really make a difference. When I get fed up of one, bring out the next flavor. I know there was one sort of stubborn night period where I was like, I don't want anything other than water. And then someone bought a different flavor and that was okay. So definitely kind of on board with the powders. I would probably stay clear of the gels personally. I think if you have too many, they are known to have a laxative effect, and sort of feel like I'd rather fuel on solid food. I will have a gel on the boat as like an emergency gel. I'll probably have some, and I have in the past, like Serene or something taped onto the boat. I know a couple of years ago with Sam at Cookham, our support crew weren't there, and we both sort of thought, oh, why don't we have a snack from the boat? So always good to be able to kind of have a backup and be really calm about it. It doesn't matter if we haven't seen our support crew. We do have options with us. Let's be sensible. Let's take a stop. Let's eat, and then let's carry on. But I probably won't be going crazy on the gels.
And overnight, are you sort of moving into sort of like hot drinks at all? Or do you tend to kind of just keep it the same throughout?
I've always had a hot squash as an option in the car. I'm not a caffeine drinker. I'm sure if you are a caffeine drinker, tea or coffee would be delightful. But that's all really.
And in the race, in the build up to the race, are you sort of adjusting sort of your diet generally for paddling, or are you kind of just keep it sort of fairly sort of straightforward as you normally would?
I keep it pretty straightforward. I try not to overthink too much. If you're having 3 healthy meals and eating all around it as well, with the volume of training that lots of us will be doing, the kind of main question is make sure that you're getting enough in. And to some extent, if you're having 3 healthy meals, if you have some cake in the afternoon, have some cake in the afternoon. That's not going to take away from being an amazing racer, I don't think.
As we've sort of, we're saying, the way you might sort of approach the race might be slightly different to a lot of people. I appreciate you saying, obviously, you focus on your own race, and that's the same for obviously everybody taking part. Look out for yourself. From the racing aspect, though, it's not just about, as we said, about like once on a tide or whatnot and trying to keep up to date of who's kind of where and what your position is. There's also the nuance about like when you start and how late you leave it. And there's that tense moment, especially sort of when it's the last few crews due to leave Devizes, about who's going to basically play chicken, isn't it? About who's going to leave first. And how do you sort of strategize for that in the build up? Because obviously I know you won't really want to change your start time just because someone's left sooner or later than you, but how do you do that sort of from a strategy perspective, in the build up to the race?
So I can't really talk about obviously years that I haven't been part of. I was sort of happy last year. We almost had a gentleman's agreement with each other. So there was like 3 boats, myself and Tom, Joe and Brindy, and Andy and Tom Simmons. And we all sort of discussed when we might start. We'd started together on Waterside D 2 weeks before, and had the intention that we would all work together and it would be a very efficient way to paddle. And ultimately, I think we all concluded it wasn't that efficient. There was a lot of ding-dongs, and we probably all worked harder than we should. So we were all kind of agreed that we all wanted to paddle our own race, and we needed to work out how we could agree on start times that would enable that, so that in theory we wouldn't catch each other, we wouldn't be wash hanging, and so on. And Andy and Tom Simmons were the fastest on paper at the time. Joe and Brindy were actually the 2nd fastest on paper, and we were the 3rd fastest on paper. So we sort of seeded it backwards from that, so that no one, in theory, was to catch anyone for quite a while. So Tom and I went last, because we then theoretically wouldn't have been able to catch Joe and Brindy. So that's kind of the way we came to it. I think Tom and I were quite keen on starting last. I hated the idea that you might get to Westminster and not know whether or not you'd won, and would have to wait for people to come in, which ultimately is the situation that Joe and Brindy were in. So it worked out for us, but the sort of trade-off that we took was that we were then pretty tight on the tide window. So the other guys got to go at sort of the probably most ideal time for the schedule that we effectively were all on. And we went 15 minutes later, which was okay.
Yeah, and one of the large parts of this race is primarily the fact of support crews, and I think every crew really would say it's really hard to get either fit for some crews finish, others wouldn't be able to get a good time without a really sort of efficient and strong support crew. I mean, firstly, from your perspective, how important are they to sort of your setup when you're racing?
I mean, there's no shadow of a doubt they're absolutely critical. And whether you are racing or whether you're just please a ticket to the finish, you really need your support crew, and they will patch you together throughout the night and get you to the end. So really worth kind of having, I mean, we were really lucky. Our support crew were the most experienced. I think we had various different DW record holders within our own support crew, and everyone on the crew had done DW before, and we had multiple cars and bikes and all that sort of thing. But if your support crew aren't super confident, get them out on Waterside D, go for a training paddle with them, drive the course with them, and make sure that they will feel comfortable.
And how are you sort of working with them in terms of, sort of how often are you seeing them, and what are they kind of doing for you? Because, there's some paddlers who will obviously get out of a portage, quickly put the boat down the side, have a quick mouthful before running on, or do it at the other end before they're about to put back in at a portage. Obviously, you're at the level where you just don't stop, and it's one seamless motion. So, I mean, yeah, how often are you coming across them? Are you doing it like a lot of paddlers would, like every 5 miles or so? Are you going further, shorter? Like, how does it sort of work from your perspective?
So we had 2 cars, and they're leapfrogging, so that you are seeing a car at pretty much every available opportunity, which, would have been every 5 miles or so. And trying to eat as much as possible really from the get-go, because as soon as you're hungry, it's too late. You haven't eaten enough, and you're going to struggle to kind of backfill that.
Yeah, and are they just sort of making sure that you're fed whilst you're running at the portage, or are they feeding you, sort of servicing you at like one end or the other?
Yeah, I think it's something to work out with your own crew. For us, we would do the run, and then we would take food before we got back in the boat. I think we felt like if you're trying to run fast and someone's trying to run at you with a potato, they might well miss your mouth, you might trip up. It's actually sort of less efficient than having a good run and then waiting for 2 seconds as you get in the boat. But other people think, actually, I can have 3 mouthfuls if you feed me while I'm running, because it will take me a while to run, and we can kind of keep loading them in. So depends how fast you're going to run and how comfortable you are running and eating, really. But again, that's something to pre-agree with your support crew. And if you're going to be fed at the end, then they should be standing at the end ready to feed you. If they're going to run with you, then they need to be there at the start. Our support crew were also really helpful in the night in identifying like where you want to get out. We had pretty good lights, and you can sort of see a little bit, but it's pretty hard in the dark to work out when you're tired exactly where you want to go. So if you can have someone with a light sort of saying like, here's a good get out, perhaps the bank is a little lower or there's a bit less mud, and sort of guide you through the run. That's really helpful. And again, like tell you, oh, you're coming up to some steps or whatever it is. Like Tom and I had paddled the course so many times, we knew it like the back of our hand. But when you're tired, it is so helpful just to have someone kind of narrate your way through the portage almost, really calmly.
I suppose that was probably especially useful last year with it being so dark, especially out in areas of the river.
Yeah, definitely. But the year before was really foggy, and the kind of glare from the light was almost blinding. So I think there's probably never an absolutely perfect year, and always really helpful to have your support crew kind of guiding you through. And yeah, when they get there, make sure they're not sat on their phone. Instead, they're walking the portage and they're working out kind of where you should be getting in and getting out, and where there might be an obstacle and what steps they need to tell you about, and a hole in the ground or whatever it is.
What would you say sort of the hardest part of the race is for you personally? I mean, everybody has their kind of their own sort of individual sticking points with the race. You know, it wouldn't be a challenge if there wasn't, but where is it for you?
I particularly don't like Shepperton lock cut. It feels like a very long lock cut, and it's quite slow. And like you've been on the Thames and you've been moving quite fast, and then you get there and it goes on for a while. I feel similarly about Cookham. That said, I think there are always kind of lows and highs throughout the race. And in every year I've done it, I've reached a point like quite early on where I'm like, gosh, if it stays this hard, it's going to be pretty boring. And then it gets easier again and sort of goes up and down. And I think the key thing is you've got to hope that when you're in a bad patch, your partner is in a really good patch. And they're like, great, I'm ready to go. We're going to be okay. And then the roles will reverse in a few hours and you'll look after them, and keep communicating through that. I could tell Tom, like, I've got a tummy ache, and it would make me feel better that I told him and that he knew, and we're going to work through it together. Likewise, he had a bad arm for a bit. So definitely kind of keep that communication. But on that note, in terms of support crew, going back to that conversation, I've always said to my support crew, like, don't ask how I am. There's always going to be a point in the night where obviously you want to say, I'm really rubbish right now. I feel awful. But instead, tell me, I look amazing. Doing amazing, look so strong, so proud of you. And I remember running through Penton Hook, or probably not really running, sort of hobbling my way through Penton Hook, slipped down the bank, boat fell on me, absolutely cooked. I look up and the support crew's like, wow, you're looking so strong. And I thought, gosh, maybe I am. And there's no way I was. Having looked back at the video, I was not looking strong. But actually, if they tell you that, you start to believe it. And I've always thought the same. If you smile, when you're feeling really rubbish, it automatically makes you feel better. So remind yourself, it's a privilege to be out there. It's an amazing race. There are incredible people who've given up their Easter weekend to support you, and have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you sort of how you dig yourself out of those hard points, because there's always a point where you kind of feel like I could park it now, and it just how do you sort of dig yourself? Is it just purely just that communication with your partner?
Yeah, I think the communication and the picking off milestones. So I feel rubbish, but I just need to get to Newbury, and then I'm gonna have a kit change, and it's all gonna be better from there, or whatever it is. Maybe I'll ask for a potato instead of a flapjack, and everything will be better. So just kind of lining up where the next place is. I've never thought about giving up. That's sort of never been on the cards for me. I've thought this is pretty rubbish and this might go on for a while, but put your head down and you will get there.
Yeah, and what advice would you have for anyone sort of thinking about taking on the race, whether it's sort of, for first time perspective, anyone that may be paddling already or may never even picked up a paddle before?
Give it a go. Be brave and kind of have a go. As I said before, and Tom said to me, it can be a multi-year game, and that's okay. Prepare as best you can, and there are lots of things that you can do in terms of your training, in terms of your nutrition, in terms of knowing the course. That is a really important one, especially when it gets dark and you're tired. But give it a go and go out there and have fun. And when it comes to racing, have fun and also stay calm, I think, is a really big one for me. It's probably ironic coming from me because I do like to overthink things. But actually, so you can lose so much energy overthinking the fact that you had a tummy ache and that's going to ruin your race because you didn't eat enough, or the fact that your support crew missed one stop, or the fact that you spent 5 minutes tying your shoelace. And actually, in the scheme of things, none of these things matter. So stay calm, do what you got to do, and you will get through it. In 2023, actually, our rudder cable slipped twice and we stopped for about 10 minutes both times. And I feel like you could get in a massive flap that this is costing you 10 minutes and this is the worst thing in the world. Or you could sit on the bank and eat some ravioli and get on with it when your support crew have fixed it. And I would definitely choose that option.
Yeah, well, I think that's some great advice to end the episode on. So, no, thank you very much for joining me for this episode, and good luck for this year's race. I hope it's just as successful for you. As I say, we'll be back. We're not long now until Easter, a couple of weeks away. So there's not too many episodes left, but we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.